Welcome, fellow explorers. My name is Christian Alexanderson, and this is Hemlocks to Hellbenders, a podcast highlighting Pennsylvania's parks, forests, and great outdoors. Hundreds of years ago, a group of American Indians living along the lower Susquehanna River made an indelible mark on the valley. At what is now known as Safe Harbor, they made hundreds of carvings into the rocks found in the middle of the river. Animals, bird and animal tracks, directional symbols, teaching or storytelling images, humans and anthropomorphic images, spiritual symbols, and geometric and abstract designs were painstakingly carved into the boulder-strewn landscape. From the banks of the river, the sites look like any other rocks found in the river. But up close, these stunning petroglyphs offer a window into a fascinating culture that we still know very little about. Despite American Indians being driven from their homes, villages, and hunting grounds, despite countless floods, despite dam construction, despite pollution, despite industry, and despite man's constant need to exert his will over the river, these magnificent petroglyphs remain. Big Indian Rock, Little Indian Rock, Circle Rock, Turkey Track Rock, Eagle Rock, and Conestoga Rock, right in the middle of the Susquehanna River as they have for generations. These sites are sacred spaces for American Indians. The Safe Harbor petroglyphs are a rare, direct connection to indigenous peoples who lived along the Susquehanna River long before European contact. For many Native communities, these carvings are not just historical artifacts, but living cultural expressions, messages left by ancestors that carry spiritual meaning. Their location along the river, a vital, life-giving force, further reinforces their sacred nature as places of reverence, storytelling, and ancestral presence. And unlike many pieces of indigenous rock art, they are accessible to the public. But that accessibility comes with a responsibility. These rock carvings are irreplaceable cultural and spiritual expressions created by indigenous peoples, and even small actions can cause permanent damage. Visitors also have a responsibility to listen and learn. Approaching the petroglyphs with humility means acknowledging that these sites hold meaning far deeper than what we may fully understand, and that it represents living cultures whose histories and voices have too often been ignored or erased. Early in the process of recording this episode, I reached out to several American Indian nations to invite their voices and perspectives on these important sites. While they ultimately chose not to participate, I respect their decision and the sovereignty and protocols that guide how stories are shared. Although I had hoped to include those perspectives directly in this conversation, it wasn't possible for this episode. We are, however, honored to be joined by an incredible guest who brings a lifetime of experience and knowledge to this discussion. I'm excited to welcome Paul Nevin to the podcast. Paul is recognized as the leading authority of rock art of the lower Susquehanna River and is the author of A Guide to the Safe Harbor Petroglyphs. Paul, thanks so much for joining the program.
My pleasure to be with you.
When did you first become aware of the Safe Harbor petroglyphs?
Well, honestly, I think it was in elementary school. I had a visit to a place called Indian Steps Museum down along the Susquehanna River in second grade. And they had a couple plaster models of the rocks that have the petroglyphs on them there. And I think I probably encountered them again in high school or college, but around the time I was graduating from college, I got more interested in the Native American culture. And someone gave me a copy of the study that was done by Donald Cadzow back in the 1930s when they were getting ready to build Safe Harbor Dam. They did a pretty major expedition for the day. And when I read that book, I realized that well, let me back up just a second. So all of the information back in, I'm talking the 1980s, and this was before, internet and all that, but the general public believed that the petroglyphs were no longer there. So when I went down to the Indian Steps and read their display, it said these are now underwater. And so I wasn't even sure that they were there anymore. But I got a good idea of where they would have been by this report. And I was interested in just going to places that the Native people saw as special places, kind of a sacred landscape. And I thought even if they're not there anymore, I'd still like to just get the feel of the place. So I got a big old aluminum Grumman canoe and started paddling around. And one day I was paddling by a big rock and I looked down and I saw a petroglyph.
How did you first become involved in visiting and then exploring the petroglyph sites? When did that start for you?
Well, okay, so this was early 1980s that I started visiting, and I was just intrigued. Once I found one, I knew I was at the rock called Big Indian Rock, and shortly after I uh, uh, found Little Indian Rock, and I I started taking pictures, and back then it was acceptable practice to do like rubbings of them and that kind of thing. And as also around the same time, I became friends with a Mexica elder. Now the Mexica are from the Valley of Mexico, so not a local people, but the elder that I grew to consider as a father figure, grandfather, was also interested in the petroglyphs that I found here. So it was the combination of being more involved in the Native American culture and just that the curiosity about the place.
It's certainly one of those topics that once you hear it, your imagination kind of goes wild of who did these, what were they like, where do they hunt, where do they live, what was their community structure like. I was fortunate enough to go out to the petroglyph site with you and with so much of your expertise. And if anything, it made me even more intrigued to learn more. But to kind of start from the very beginning, who's believed to have created the petroglyphs and what do we know about the indigenous communities connected to them?
Well, we don't know a lot for certain. There is an obscure reference from way back the time of William Penn, saying that that he asked the Susquehannock people, who are the local native people in this area, he asked them what they knew about the petroglyphs, and they said that they didn't know, that it was something that the ancients left. Um, Now, through years and years of hypotheses about who actually created them, I have come to a reasonable conclusion, along with a lot of other people in the archaeological community, that they were actually created by a people we know of as the Shanks Ferry people. And of course, they're called the Shanks Ferry people. That's not what they called themselves. They were a pre-contact group, so they were in this area before Europeans arrived, and so we don't know what they called themselves, but we know that they were an agricultural people. They came into the area maybe 1200 AD, something like that, 800, 1200 AD. And they were in this area when the Susquehannock people came from northern Pennsylvania in the mid 1500s. People associate Susquehannocks with the Susquehanna River, think of them as the people who lived here forever, but they were really people who came from a different place and moved to this area. They were the last people to arrive here before the Europeans. So the Shanks Ferry people were, we don't know whether it was a violent confrontation or whether it was a mutual agreement, but the Susquehannock people absorbed at least some of the Shanks Ferry people, and they just, their culture really disappeared.
That's the fascinating part about this too is like you expect, I don't know, maybe because of how much history we have and we know so much that you just go, oh, I'll Google Shanks Ferry people, I'm sure we have volumes of information about them, and that's just not the case.
No, that's not the case. If you dabble in archaeology like I do, you can dig and dig, and it's easier now with the internet than it was 45 years ago. But you're right. There's not a lot of books about the Shanks Ferry people. We do know that we think that they were an Algonquian, associated with Algonquian people, related to people like the Lenape or the Nanticoke. Um, they the Algonquian people were all up and down the east coast and into the north central United States, but they were a completely different cultural group than the Susquehanna people. We don't have any Susquehanna people were Iroquoian, associated with Iroquoian groups, and there just isn't any rock art in Iroquois land. So that kind of takes the Susquehannocks out of it and puts it into the hands of the Shanks Ferry people.
Do we have any idea how old these petroglyphs are?
Well, if they were done by the Shanks Ferry people, they were done between about 800 AD and 1500 AD.
What kinds of images or symbols appear on the safe harbor rocks, and what might they represent?
Well, the petroglyphs at Safe Harbor are, I would say, they are most like petroglyphs that are found in the area of the Great Lakes up into what they call the Canadian Shield, that are done by people like the Ojibwe or Chippewa. They are images of animals, um, the tracks that they make. Um, there are abstract symbols. There are symbols that relate um, to their religion or spiritual aspects of their life. Um, a lot of what is there, we really cannot decipher. Um, this Mashika elder early on said, to understand the petroglyphs, you have to be part of that culture. You have to understand the landscape around you. The native world is, oh, if we pretend we're a radio, we receive on a certain frequency. The native people were here before us. We're tuned to a different station.
Yeah.
So if you are not, tuned into that station, it makes it difficult to understand them. It's, I think of one of the people who created the petroglyphs seeing a no left turn sign, a bent arrow with a circle and a line through it. What would they think that was? So it's not an easy thing to decipher.
I find it really interesting too that if you're not either on top of them or not being pointed out, you could drive right past them and never know they were there.
Yeah, that is maybe it's a good thing that the people they weren't very obvious, but they were carved very very shallow. They're very shallow carvings, less than a quarter of an inch, most of them. And that is uh, probably due to the rock being so hard. It just to make a little depression into the rock, it takes a lot of time. The size of a quarter, and it takes about 20 minutes. There's petroglyphs down there that are 9 feet long. So it's really a big expenditure of time and effort to create these. They're not just graffiti that's scratched in there, but because they're so shallow, when they were freshly done, they would have been more obvious. You could see the difference between the fresh cuts and the skin of the rock surrounding rock. But over time, they've developed the same patina as the rest of the rock. And if it's cloudy or if the sun's straight overhead, they can be almost impossible to see. You stand there for a couple hours until the sun starts setting, and all of a sudden they start magically appearing. That low light angle cast shadows within the petroglyphs, and they appear almost like magic.
What are some of the highlights for you of the petroglyph sites? What are some of the ones that really stand out in your mind?
Back in the 1980s, petroglyphs were considered by archaeologists as prehistoric graffiti. Um, the idea was we're never going to know what these people were thinking. They were down there fishing. The fish weren't biting. They carved these things into the rocks just to kill some time. As I got involved in the Native American culture, it became obvious that Native people did not share that belief. They consider rock art sites as sacred places, and just the act of creating a petroglyph is considered a sacred act. So I I took it upon myself to try to convince the archaeological community that they were more than just graffiti. So there is one particular petroglyph that is the design is of it's a human figure. He appears to be walking towards the south, he and she, or she, and there are two dots carved beside this figure. We in the biz we call them cupules. These it's as if somebody took a golf ball and just pressed it into the rock a little bit, a little hemispherical um, uh, divot in the rock. Um, a lot of the petroglyphs down at Safe Harbor have these dots carved beside them. We call them associated cupules now. Um, and the way they are arranged, the proximity to the petroglyph designs, it shows us that they were carved along with those petroglyph designs on purpose. They were meant to convey some sort of information. And so this one particular petroglyph, um, if we look at John Smith, the earlier explorer who sailed around the Chesapeake Bay, he encountered Native people who told him of the Susquehanna, who their heartland was in Lancaster County. He couldn't get his boats up the river to visit, so he sent two of his representatives up to their settlement. And in his journal, he says it took 2 days to walk from the mouth of the Susquehanna to the Susquehannock settlement. Now, the Susquehannock settlement's right by the Safe Harbor petroglyphs. There appears to be a man who is walking downstream, and he has two dots carved beside him. So suppose those two dots mean that it's a 2 day journey to go from Safe Harbor to the Chesapeake Bay. They may mean something completely different, but I think that's a reasonable guess. And so that's one of my favorite because it just elevates the petroglyphs from being just pictorial images. You know, I see a person, I draw a person, to something that we've been familiarized with more recently, iconographic images. So if you think of your icons on your smartphone, This native person looking at a circle with two dots and a line on it might not know that it's a person grinning, but um, uh, these dots are telling us that they're meant to transmit some sort of information, which is really significant.
What's really interesting to me is that there's a lot that we don't know about the petroglyphs. For you, as somebody who has a passion for this and has studied this, is that exciting or is that frustrating? Or both?
Um, it's it's interesting because uh, uh, they make you think, and I think that one of the purposes of that place is as a place where you can think. If that makes sense, you can think about your relationship to the earth. Um, if you're a native person going out there, and maybe they're relating some sort of stories to you or something like that. But if you don't know what they are, they make you think. Um, Fortunately, or um, there are some there that we can decipher, and I think the most interesting ones from that aspect are the ones that um, are astronomical markers. Back in the early 2000s, I received a grant from the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission to record the petroglyphs. People were getting more interested. I discovered four other sites in that vicinity that had petroglyphs on them. And when I was setting up to trying to figure out how I was going to do the project, I noticed that there were two serpent shapes that were facing almost due east. Now, the sun rises in the east on the equinoxes. It sets in due west if you're on a level horizon. I was actually kind of set on this direction by a native elder who's said that maybe there are astronomical things going on down there. At any rate, these serpents were facing pretty much where the sun should rise on the first day of spring. I started going down at each of the seasons for sunrise, and um, it turns out that it's true. They are a pair of 9 foot long serpents point to the spot on the horizon where the sun rises on the first day of spring and first day of fall. And it's extra interesting because they don't point due east. The sun, if you can imagine how the sun travels, it kind of is on an orbit that is towards the south. So in the morning, they have to come up over a hillside along the river. The sun is drifting towards the south, and by the time it gets to the top of the hillside and you can see it, it's about 9 degrees south of east, and that's where the serpents are pointing. So they were done by direct observation. Of course, you could say there's 400 petroglyphs there. If you look hard enough, you will be able to find a petroglyph that does that. Well, it turns out that right beside them, there's another serpent shape, and that serpent shape points to where the sun sets on the first day of summer and where it rises on the first day of winter. So now we have two of them, two serpents, actually three serpents. And then it turns out that on another rock, there's a serpent that points to where the sun sets on the first day of spring and fall. So now we have four of them, and they just happen to be the four largest serpent shapes at Safe Harbor. They all point to these uh, calendaric markers.
I mean, I feel like a discovery like that, you must have been to the moon.
It really made my hair stand on end. You know, I had been to a place on the Yucatan Peninsula, Chichen Itza, where there's a pyramid that on the first day of spring, thousands of people come to this pyramid to watch the sun cast a shadow that appears to be a serpent that's going down a stairway. And at the bottom of the stairway, there's a huge serpent's head that it joins up with. And, you know, to see this happening at Safe Harbor, 1,200 miles away, the same celestial event, marked with the same designs. That really makes you think.
Yeah.
You know, what's up with that?
Yeah, I mean, just being able to stand on the rock and even be able to see photos of when everything kind of lines up. That just so excited me because the first thing I think of is who carved this, what was the reason, what were they thinking? It just gets your mind racing. It made me feel like a kid of just like this exciting exploration and discovery of something that we don't have information about. So seeing something that so clearly lines up is really cool. And now that I'm thinking about it, we should probably set the scene in terms of what Safe Harbor looks like. In terms of, so the site of where these petroglyphs are now is vastly different from how it used to be, just because there's a big giant dam just of river that's not only changed the landscape, the look of things, but it's also put a number of petroglyphs underwater that we're not able to see. Can you describe what that area looks like so that people can get a picture in their mind?
Sure. Now, the petroglyphs seem to be in a big lake. There's a dam 9 or 10 miles down from them that backs the water the whole way up to where they're sitting. And so the water is normally relatively calm there. It's like you're in a lake. Um, but the hillsides are pretty undisturbed. In fact, they're recognized as an indigenous cultural landscape, meaning that the land itself looks very much the way it did when the native people were here. So we have the benefit of the river being non-navigable and these hills that feel like roller coasters when you're driving from one place to another in the area. So it was never developed. But when you're on the petroglyphs in the middle of the Susquehanna, and you take a look around, you it's almost as if you're in a bowl. And I would call it a not only a bowl that you're sitting in, it looks like you're actually surrounded by the mountains, but you're also in a sky dome. You have an incredible view of the sky. And of course, we live in Penns Woods, Pennsylvania. So there were it was forested. You know, you didn't have clear views of the sky like that. And I think that's one of the reasons why people were attracted to it, so that they could view the sky. Now, the other thing is, before the dams were built, the water was swift. There were um, really pretty wicked rapids for a couple miles above it, and fast water flowing beside it. Um, it's in an area that for us who visit that part of the river, we know it as the Susquehanna Gorge, and it's not the Grand Canyon, but in terms of the Susquehanna River, when you think of it flowing the first 400 miles from Cooperstown, New York, to the top of Lancaster County, that's a very flat, wide river. When it gets to Lancaster County, it drops. It drops a lot, like from 2 feet per mile to 7 feet per mile. So as a result, we have 7 or 4 power plants, hydroelectric plants along there. So it was an area that was really a dramatic landscape. And I think that factored into why the Native people came here too.
When you talk about the fact that there are 400 petroglyphs in the area, it's not that there's 400 different rocks where there's petroglyphs. There's a number of specific sites and islands, if you were, that have these kind of have these petroglyphs. Would you be able to kind of just run through a couple of the ones that we were able to visit and kind of in terms of like how many might be on one as opposed to another?
Sure. Well, first of all, when this part of the river was flowing at its natural level, there were hundreds of, and I'll call them bedrock exposures. Okay, they are rocks that have resisted all the thousands and thousands of years of erosion. They're the hardest chunks of rock out there. And there were literally hundreds of rocks that people could have chosen to carve upon. Um, one of these rocks, Big Indian Rock, is the biggest, hardest, most prominent rock out in that section of the river. It's about maybe 60 feet long, 40 feet wide. And when the river was at its natural level, it stood about 20 feet above the surface of the river. It's very obvious that and the perfect place to go to create petroglyphs. It has a smooth surface. Really, if there was one rock I would choose to carve on, that would be the one. Um, Little Indian Rock is similar. It's a large rock, maybe 30 by 40 feet. It stood maybe 10 feet above the surface of the water when the petroglyphs were created. It's a much smaller rock, but it has many more petroglyphs. Big Indian Rock has maybe 40. Little Indian Rock has well over 100.
Wow, yeah.
They're two pretty conspicuous rocks, and they have smooth surfaces. Um, there is a rock in between them that is only maybe 15 feet by 15 feet, and it's got a craggy surface, and that has petroglyphs on them. The petroglyphs on that rock are almost exclusively bird tracks. Um, there is a large rock called Circle Rock, which is probably the size of Big Indian Rock, but it sits closer to the water and it has a very irregular surface. It has little big potholes that hold water, so there's only ponds on top of it. It's a very irregular surface, but there are two smooth areas on there, and there are a lot of petroglyphs carved on that. One of the ones that's most uh, char- uh, characteristic of that rock actually is the design of the cupules, the dots. There's a lot of those, but there's also a really nice concentric circle, design of concentric circles that's maybe 2 feet in diameter. So that the rocks that contain the petroglyphs vary in size and character, and the petroglyphs that are carved on them also vary in their composition.
With the river changing so much with the various dams, to even think of their location of each petroglyph could mean something different than what we think of today, because maybe it was a navigable symbol. Maybe it was, when you start to raise a river so much, you lose a little bit of the context of what it was originally like. To be able to see everything on top, you don't know if there's things on the side. I remember, I think it was Big Indian Rock, that there's petroglyphs on the side that you can't really see because of the water, and they could have meant something for travelers or for the people that live there. That was useful or religious, and we just have no idea.
There are probably petroglyphs there in that area that are submerged. Um, they would be incredibly difficult to find because they're hard enough to find the ones that are on the surface. But if you get underwater, you lose all the qualities of the light, and they are also covered with mud and algae. So there might be more there, um, but you're right. The rocks themselves that may have the placement of the rocks may have had some significance. They do the ones that we know of that have petroglyphs on them are they line up in groups of three. And so they may have served as directional markers of some sort.
And now, let's hear from our sponsors. Looking to get outside this winter? Join Keystone Trails Association for guided hikes highlighting bird migration, maple sugaring, and more. Learn more at kta-hike.org. It's better outside, especially with a Purple Lizard map in your pack. Their award-winning cartography helps you see the big picture and explore some of the best outdoor destinations in Pennsylvania. Each map reveals trails, forests, and small towns waiting to be discovered, helping you plan, wander, and reconnect with the world around you. Discover the Pennsylvania Outdoor Recreation Map and the full collection at purplelizard.com, where outstanding maps lead to outstanding adventures. Hey fellow explorers, this is a message from the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation. You know those incredible state parks and forests Christian talks about on every episode? We're the ones helping to make sure they stay incredible. From maintaining the trails you hike to engaging volunteer groups who make your experience better, to supporting conservation projects that protect Pennsylvania's natural treasures while keeping these places accessible, we're behind the scenes making it happen. Whether you're planning your next waterfall hike or just dreaming about your favorite overlook, know that PPFF is working to preserve these special places for future generations of explorers. Learn more at paparksandforests.org. Looking to add some Pennsylvania charm to your space? Sisters Sunflowers has you covered. Their unique stickers highlight the small local spots that make your community shine, from quirky caves to hidden gems. Perfect for your laptop, water bottle, or anywhere that needs a little hometown love. They got stickers, magnets, prints, and even a hand-drawn poster to keep track of all the Pennsylvania state parks and forests that you've explored. Use code HELLBENDER15 for 15% off your first order. Support local, inspire adventure, and decorate with meaning. Only at Sisters Sunflowers. Are you looking for a getaway that feels remote yet is surprisingly easy to reach? Discover Clarion County in western Pennsylvania. Within minutes, you can wander the timeless old-growth beauty of Cook Forest or paddle the peaceful Clarion River. Explore endless trails, breathe deep, and find the escape you've been missing. With lodging from luxury cabins and high-end Airbnbs to family campgrounds and budget-friendly hotels, your perfect stay awaits. Plan your escape at discoverclarioncounty.com. Clarion County, your trailhead to happiness. Ready to trade your office commute for fresh tracks in Pennsylvania's Laurel Highlands? Close the laptop, grab your gear, and get out on snow-covered terrain. You can ski or snowboard at your choice of 4 resorts. You can even cross-country ski or snowshoe, or take a winter hike and soak it all in. And when it's time to slow things down, there's plenty to do. Settle in with great food, plenty of laughs, and a cozy place to stay. Maybe a cabin in the woods, a treehouse hideaway, or even a stay at Nemacolin, an ultra-luxury resort. You can plan your winter escape at golaurelhighlands.com. All right, back to the show. What do the petroglyphs mean to you personally?
Well, the petroglyphs to me are really I look at them as messages that have been left by the ancestors for us to explore. When man makes something that is to last, they make it from in stone, from the pyramids to Mount Rushmore. I think these designs were carved into the rocks. They were meant to last for a long time, and they were meant for the people who would come in the future. And so when I visit, I'm taking that in. You know, you see the a human footprint carved into the rock. And standing beside the footprint, you can imagine that 1,000 years ago, someone was standing right where you are. And you're really, you're, no, we don't step in the footprint petroglyphs, but you have you're standing in the footprints of the people uh, who lived here in the distant past. So really, for me, it's a it's a place where I like to say it's a place where you can go to be closer to Creator. You're standing on Mother Earth, looking at the sky, and it just the place has a special feeling. I think that really kind of you set the rest of your life aside and just ponder your place on Mother Earth, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it felt very special and almost ethereal when I was there with you, just to be able to see everything that was made by these people, which is so special. But then, I mean, incredibly great weather that we were there that day. I mean, how many bald eagle pairs that we saw soaring above. It was just one of those moments of where you're like, I want to remember this. Like, this is so much so that I remember you being like, if you want, we could stay out for a couple more hours. Couple more hours. I mean, once you're out there, it feels like time is standing still, just so that you can really take in how wonderful that whole place is.
Yeah, it's and again, in the among Native people, the idea is that the petroglyphs were not created to make the place sacred. They were made because it is a special place.
I think that's a perfect segue. Do we understand what kind of cultural or spiritual significance these carvings might have held for the people that created them?
Well, there are certain designs that relate to their spirituality. Um, for example, and we can go to contemporary native groups to use them as a reference. The like the Ojibwe and the Chippewa people, um, they were uh, still practicing their traditions at the time when Europeans arrived. So some of that information has been passed on, and we can use that to help us decipher some of the images. For example, there are images that look like a bird's with their wings and the bird standing on its back legs. That's a symbol that is throughout North America. It symbolizes a thunderbird, and the thunderbird is really a symbol used to give thanks that the Creator brings rain. Okay, so in simplest terms, they say when the thunderbird flaps its wings, that's what makes the thunder. Um, now, there, there's other designs that go in that same direction. There's a design known as the horned underwater serpent. Ginnebik is what it's called by the Ojibwe, and there's a whole symbolism in involved with that particular design too. Um, I didn't grow up in the native culture, and so I have to look at these things as an outside observer. And if you're going into the spirituality of it, then you're really delving into an area that is, you know, left for medicine people, right?
What sort of work have you done with Native American groups interested in the petroglyphs?
Um, well, I've taken a number of people out over the year, Native people out over the years, and I think I guess when when they hear that there's a non-native out there and going out, the people are going out to the sacred site, um, they are raises some concerns, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think when they actually go out and experience it in the way that I present it, um, I I I think that they are moved to. Um, you know, I had some native elders from Colombia, South America, out this spring and this fall, and they just felt like there was a connection between that place and their home in Colombia. That there's the special places all over the world that are really are connection points.
Yeah.
And again, in this culture, it's a little bit difficult to describe those things. But I I think whereas in some areas of the country, the Native people are very possessive of rock art sites. Um, maybe the fact that there aren't native people, the original people. There's many native people who who are currently living in the area, but Shanks Ferry people are not one of those groups. Um, I think maybe that might there's not a one-on-one connection between Native people and these particular rock art sites. So I would say that the the they have the people that I've taken out have a pretty positive view of, of of the place and how it's being treated.
How are visitors able to see the petroglyphs today?
With some difficulty, they are in the middle of the river, so you can't walk right up to them. Many times of the year, they're inaccessible just because of the river flow. Um, and they're pretty difficult to find if you don't know where they are. Um, 40 years ago, very few people visited. As they became better known, more people have started going out. Of course, the advent of the economical kayak has really helped bring people to the river,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great thing. So more people are visiting, and so we have to think in terms of the conservation of these sites. And it used to the philosophy in the rock art community used to be that if no one knew that the sites were there, they would be protected. Um, there is graffiti uh, on the rocks that was carved there 100 years ago. There's graffiti that was carved 50 years ago. People do find them. And if they're sitting out there all by themselves for days on end, um, you know, people will do things like that.
Sure.
The current philosophy is that we really want to bring people to these sites. We want to educate them that they're not just a place where people created graffiti, but this is like walking into these people's church. And so the idea is that rather than leaving them out there alone all by themselves, that it's okay for people to come and visit them. Now, when people do visit, we want them to be educated,
Yeah.
and so Last year, I decided to put this information into a book, a guide to visiting the petroglyphs, and it tells you it gives you the ethics of visiting and also the logistics. You know, if you come, you want to have a rope to tie off your boat because in this area, the dams control the water level. And the water can come up 6 inches in 15 minutes. You know, if you get excited and you leave your boat on on a rock, um, and the water comes up 6 inches, your boat might float away. So there's a whole both ethically and logistically. There's a good bit to know about going out there. It's not the kind of thing that you go out and get an inflatable kayak, and the next day you go out and paddle around. You want to go out with a guide, preferably, because a guide can get you to the right rocks and point out things that you're never going to see by yourself, and also kind of be able to read the river. Um, things things happen quickly there between the flow of the dams or a storm coming up, and you want to be with someone who is familiar with the river, or you yourself, be an outdoor person.
Why did you start offering tours to see the petroglyphs?
Because I think it's something that needs to be shared, and I'd gotten that advice uh, from Native people, probably more than from the archaeological community, really. Um, that there's a message there that is meant to be seen and experienced, and uh, we live in a society where people get up in the morning and they go from their living room into their garage, get in their car, they go to the garage at work, they get out, they go to work, and rinse and repeat, you know. And so this we've gotten so far away from connecting with the natural world, um, and connecting with it as humans. Uh, I think it's valuable for us to go out into this place, um, and kind of get a glimpse into that world, where people did live in tune with nature. It's the perfect place to do it. And if you're interested in the native culture, you can go to a museum, and see, all of the artifacts that you want to see, but they are not in the context of where they were created.
Uh-huh.
I think that's one of the most special things about this site. You get to see these artifacts, these creations that people made 1,000 years ago, and you get to see them in the context that they're meant to be seen in.
Ethics is really important when we're talking about these sites because of how important they are, and because they are spiritual sites for Native Americans. What steps do you take to ensure your activities don't damage the petroglyphs, and the same with people that you take on tours?
Yeah. Well, the main thing is that we avoid walking on the petroglyphs themselves. And that's one of the things, if you know where they are, if you have a chart that shows them, you can, you know where it's a good place to walk and where you're going to be walking on petroglyphs. Um, we ask that people walk in bare feet. that no fires be built. These rocks are the hardest chunks of rock out there. They can really resist the water, but they cannot resist fire.
Yeah.
And so uh, chalking them in or coloring them in, you might think that it's would make them more visible, that you're doing people a favor, but it's really you know one, it encourages vandalism
Hmm.
because when you see something like that, some people are encouraged to do their own things. So really, those are the main things that you can should consider, and also just the aspect that you are in essentially a Native American church, and um, I guess we sometimes think of Native people as being very serious and stoic, and maybe you should go out there and not say a word um, or be very prayerful when you're there. Native people are us, and we're us. They're happy, sad, angry. All of the same emotions. So it's fine to go out there and be yourself, but jumping off the rocks, we think feel like just being disrespectful.
Yeah.
You want to be respectful of the place.
Yeah, it's interesting. How do you balance public interest in the petroglyphs with the need to protect a fragile cultural resource? I know that's something that modern archaeologists care a lot about, and certainly indigenous cultures. But I think you've made a great point about. I think the more you visit something, the more you're going to care about it. And whether that be a state park or a forest, I think if you have access to it, I think once you start cutting off access, it gets a little tricky in terms of who's allowed out there, why they're allowed out there. Um, it's difficult. I know, there's a lot of really interesting conversations going on about Native American culture and who can share and who shouldn't, or why and why not. It's kind of an ongoing, evolving issue.
Yeah, and each site has its own characteristics. Safe harbor, you really you can't put a fence around these.
Yeah.
Uh, right. Any kind of construction is subject to being destroyed by floods, and so there's really no way. You can't have a guard out there to keep people from going on. People are going to visit, and so you have to figure out how's the best way that they can visit. And you know uh some sites are very fragile. You step on something and you'll break it. The petroglyphs are on rock that's extremely durable. um they are really resistant to wear. um there comes a point when there is an overload that maybe there could be too many people visiting there, and that's a management issue that we have to look at. It would be great to be able to have an onshore replica that people could see, and uh, pictograph the cave paintings in France. They have a duplicate that people could visit. It's not quite the same experience, but it would be another way of um, just getting a sense of what's there.
What are the major threats to the long-term preservation of the sites?
One person could do a lot of damage um, in an instant. There's carving on little Indian rock from a, a soldier who visited in 1917.
Hmm.
And he carved his initials and the date right over one of the petroglyphs. It's easy to do. You could do an incredible amount of destruction in one day.
Hmm.
Um, we might be able to do some video surveillance, but you're doing it at a huge distance. There's no way that you can put surveillance cameras around it. We really have to rely on educating the public. We do have signs out there that do have a chart of where the petroglyphs are located, and they state the ethics of being out there. We also have a visitor log that we keep on big and little Indian rocks that people can sign. And it's even a little thing like signing a visitor log gives you some ownership of the site, right?
Yeah.
And so there's some subtle things that we can do that help preserve the place. In the 45 years that I've been visiting the petroglyphs, there have been no new petroglyphs created there.
That's great. What misconceptions do people have about the petroglyphs?
I guess maybe at this particular site, it might be just uh, having the ability to actually see them.
Hmm.
And that might sound funny, but most people are exposed to petroglyphs. They're exposed to the ones in the Southwest United States,
Yeah.
and the ones out there are much different than the ones that we have here. Out there, they are obvious. The rocks have what's called a desert varnish, but they have this dark patina. And to create a petroglyph out there, you merely need to scratch through that patina, and voila, you have a petroglyph.
Yeah.
That's not what you're going to see at Safe Harbor. At Safe Harbor, it's very dependent on the lighting conditions, with how you're going to see them. So people might think that you go out there and you're going to find the petroglyphs, and the fact of the matter is that there are many people who have spent many hours out looking for them, and not found them. So I think maybe another thing is that they actually think that they're much older than they are, that they're maybe thousands of years old. And there are other rock art sites on that section of the Susquehanna that might be much older than these. But these we can relate to people who lived there in that specific time period, and there are also images of there's a couple of images of people with bows and arrows. And so, bow and arrow didn't come into this region until 1,000, 1,200 years ago. And so that brings these up in in indigenous in Native American terms into the recent past.
One of the things I was really blown away by is that while many of the symbols look similar in terms of how they were made and what they kind of look like, upriver and downriver on the river are still completely different with how they look.
That is one of the big mysteries of rock art on the lower Susquehanna. Susquehanna River drains 27,000 square miles, and all of the rock art sites that we know of in that 27,000 square miles are located on a 30 or so mile stretch of the Susquehanna River. So, why is that? And then on top of that, there's a site just 2 miles north of Safe Harbor that's now submerged, where the petroglyphs were entirely different. They're not images of animals and animal tracks. They're abstract symbols of things that look like almost like um, Chinese writing or tic-tac-toe boards, all kinds of things like that. You go 20 miles south of Safe Harbor, and there were a group of petroglyphs known as the Bald Friar petroglyphs, and they are a completely different style than the other two. Were they done by different people? Were they done thousands of years or hundreds of years apart from each other? Or did they serve a different function? So we don't know. It's a mystery, but it's just shows what a special place that is, that part of the Susquehanna River.
How do you think the safe harbor petroglyphs fit into the larger story of indigenous history in Pennsylvania and the Susquehanna River Valley? A very easy question for you to for you to take on.
Yeah, that's a tough question. There isn't a lot of rock art in the Northeast United States to begin with. Um, there's not a lot in the Susquehanna watershed. When you get out into Western Pennsylvania, you do find more petroglyph sites. They look different than the ones here. Some things in common, some things different. Um, but how it I maybe the basic idea is that native people have been here for a long time, and um, and they're and they still have a presence, I guess. Um, the petroglyphs are still there. Native people are still here. They they there are native people. Despite what um, history says, there's native people who did not go west, who stayed in Pennsylvania, who have ancestors that go back into pre-contact times. But you also have native people who have moved into this area over the years, from Seneca people who moved here in the 1700s to Saponis who moved here in the 1950s. Um, it's but it, it, there's that continuity, I guess, that the native story is not not just in the past, but in the present too.
If someone is interested in visiting the petroglyphs, what measures should they take to ensure they don't damage any of the sites?
Well, I think I think we talked about that. That you, you just want to be gentle,
Yeah,
really, and not. Um, I think really you want to be gentle.
yeah.
It is a cultural resource that is um, it's and priceless. It's a priceless cultural resource, and you want to you do your part to protect them.
And I completely believe that your book, A Guide to the Safe Harbor Petroglyphs, is a must for anybody who wants to learn more and wants to possibly go out to these petroglyphs, because I think you do a really great job of not only saying these are the precautions you should take. Please be, I mean, in the very first page, you kind of say, these places are sacred. Do not do anything disrespectful. Do not, but you also give really good information for people that don't have your knowledge, don't have your experience to be like, I wonder where these things are, what they look like. So I would definitely suggest people check them out. But let's say somebody doesn't ever get on the river and they want to see petroglyphs. They could go to the Pennsylvania Capitol building.
Yeah, that's an idea. So they have been recorded in different ways by different people over the years. Anything from photographs to making rubbings of them to, now LiDAR images, three-dimensional images. But there was one person in particular who visited there back in 1895, a guy by the name of Henry Mercer. And Henry Mercer had the Moravian tile works over in Doylestown. And it just turns out that his biggest commission was the commission for the tile floor in the state capitol building. And if you've been in the state capitol and seen that floor, you'll know that it depicts the natural and human history of Pennsylvania. In 1895, Henry Mercer visited the petroglyphs. He sketched many of them in his journal, and 20 or so years later, some of those designs turned up in the mosaic tiles in the floor of the Capitol building. So yeah, really neat way to experience them.
And you better believe after I went to the petroglyph site with you, the next day at work, I went through the Capitol and was trying to find as many as I could. Now, I know there's a couple that are that have kind of been covered up by different various furniture or things like that, but there's a number you could still see that are really special. I love, I work in the Capitol as my full-time job, and I love that building. I think do not just go there on a field trip with your kids or when you were a kid. Spend some time there. It's really wonderful. The tiles are really beautiful, and to be able to see the fact that such an important part of history and the valley is recorded on those tiles and they're not going anywhere is really cool too.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Now, there are a couple museums in the area that have examples of petroglyphs that were removed from basically from a site called Walnut Island, which is now submerged. In the 1930s, they were salvaged, and so the Conestoga Area Historical Society in Lancaster County has a couple of the rocks that were salvaged, and the Blue Rock Heritage Center, which is below Wrightsville, also has a couple of those rocks. There are a couple in the State Museum too, but right now they are. I believe that whole gallery is closed to the public, and the museum's going to be undergoing some major renovations, so they might not be as accessible. But you can see a couple of the real things in museums.
Where can people go to book tours to the petroglyphs or to purchase your book?
Well, I have a website that's easy to remember, safeharborpetroglyphs.com. And there is information about tours that I lead. I am basically a tour guide. We You can reserve a time of your choosing. We don't have set group tours, that kind of thing. Um, so tours can be arranged by going on to that website. And the book is also available uh, from a link there. We also have T-shirts if you want to be properly attired when you go out to visit. But uh, yeah, all of the information about touring the sites is available on the website. We also have gift certificates if you want to uh, take, you know, give the gift of a petroglyph adventure to a significant person in your life. They're available too, and the tours are conducted from mid to late May to mid October.
And I have to say, I mean, I told you at the time, and I think I even sent you an email afterwards. I mean, it was one of the best afternoons of my life, and that sounds a little strange to say. Well, you went around looking at rocks with another guy for 4 hours, and you had a great time. But it was, I mean, it meant so much to me. Not only that you were so generous with your time and your knowledge, but it's undeniable that it's a very special place, and you can't help but feel I have no connection to the land. I'm not from Pennsylvania. I'm from New Jersey. I have no Native American heritage to my background, but it is a special place that you can feel pretty immediately. So, I just at least want to publicly say thank you so much for that tour. I had such a wonderful time, and I highly recommend other people taking a tour. I know I will be taking another one because I told my wife about it so much, and I said, I will pay for you to go because it is so damn cool. And then so she was like, sign me up. So thank you, Paul. I had a great time that afternoon.
That's I did too. I have a great time every time I go out. 45 years, it never gets old. It's always every time is a different experience. I've had people out in the rain, and I'm apologizing for not having a better day, and they are just totally blown away by that experience. Um, yeah, I don't think I've ever taken a person out that has not been moved in some way.
Paul, thanks so much for talking to us. We really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.
I want to thank my guest Paul Nevin for joining the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Meta for more information about upcoming episodes. You can support the podcast by buying merch at hemlockstohellbenders.com, or you can click support this show in the podcast description to provide a monthly donation. This has been Hemlocks to Hellbenders. I'll see you out there. Hosting, production, and editing by Christian Alexanderson. Music by John Sauer. Graphics by Matt Davis.